The other thing that we were looking at doing was making some fixes to some bugs that are not so much, they're mainly confusion in the UI log. It's not that the wrong thing is happening during import, it's that the wrong thing is being displayed in the log. And we also are changing one of the terms in the log. And so we had not only the log changes we had to make for multiples, but also just some general UI log changes that we wanted to make. Some of those may not get finished in Poppy, but we're trying to get as much of it done as we can. And then the next few they all say ECS, or they talk about consortia. And this is the work, if anybody attended the session that Olamide and Dennis Bridges did yesterday, this is the work that is making it so that when there's two pieces to it, there's inventory and there's data import. So there are now two new kinds of tenants in Folio, in addition to the tenants that all of you who are live already are. I call all of your tenants non-consortial tenants. You're just kind of standalones. But we also have the central consortial tenant where shared instances and shared source records are going to live. And then we have the member libraries, which are where all the holdings and items, and then local instances, local MARC records are going to live. And then what we call shadow instances will live. They are basically shadows of the shared instance, and you only have it in your member tenant if you have holdings and items that you need to attach to it. That way we didn't have to break the whole inventory structure. So these next few are the things that we're doing to empower all of that. So some UI changes that we needed to make in inventory to be able to show you your holdings and items versus your consortial partners' holdings and items. Being able to promote a local instance to be shared and everything that happens along with that. And if I am importing and I want to update, I have a file of 20 records. I want to update 5 local instances, 15 shared instances, and create holdings and items for all of them. I need to have permission to update shared up in that central tenant, but I'm going to import into my local member tenant. And then there's stuff that happens behind the scenes, thanks to Olamide, that will do the updates to the central source record, which will update the central instance, which in turn will update the shadows. And then I'll do all of my other stuff to holdings and items in my local tenant. So we have a lot of work in relation to that we're doing as the last part of Poppy. And then we basically have all of what I call our standing features that we work on. So bugs, and more bugs, the miscellaneous stuff, our automated testing that we do, all of our releases and upgrades that we have to do behind the scenes. And then we have a lot of work around manual tests and automated tests that produce bugs into JIRA automatically if the automated tests fail, to the point where we have hundreds of those issues that show up in every release. And so to keep them from kind of muddying up all the other features, I've kind of corralled them in their own feature at the bottom of the list. All right, now I can't get there we go. I just wanted to mention a few of the bug fixes before we look at the multiples. Tuesday, we talked about the ORCID critical service patches. Everything that was backported to ORCID is also a fix that is in Poppy. I'm not going to go back through those, but the PowerPoint from Tuesday is up on Sched. There were a number of inventory related, and I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time going through these. In the PowerPoint here that's on Sched, there's hot links for all of these if you want to see more details about any of them. There were little things that broke, like the save and close button stopped working all of a sudden on the item edit. The scrolling through the facets broke. Christy in here somewhere, found that you can't clear the search in the data import profiles. And so we fixed that. And we have started working on fixing some of the mappings and matches. These particular mapping fixes were when a call number field, there were 2 call numbers in a MARC record, or there were multiple subfields in an 050. Classic example is the Z bibliography call numbers that have the extra subfield A, and they were just getting all mixed up and messed up. And so we fixed those. We also came across some permissions, some either system permissions or some kind of missing user permissions that needed to be added. And part of this is because of different dev teams developing. Part of this is because we have really good manual testers who are testing with those limited permission sets like we want them to, and finding when things are missing. And so we've fixed a couple little permissions that we needed to add to make sure that inventory and MARC authorities talk to each other nicely. And we had a meltdown with OCLC a couple weeks ago that several of you are aware of, that number one, made us pay our OCLC bill, which was good. Number 2, got our credentials restored. Number 3, ferreted out a few live community members who were using the community credentials instead of their own credentials. So it was a very helpful bug that we ended up getting sorted out. We have some more bug fixes that we're working on, and the goal is to try to get these all in place in time for the feature freeze. The multiples bugs during user acceptance testing, we may or may not get done before feature freeze because I haven't had a lot of feedback yet. Mark to mark matching, we have fixed some. We think some of it may end up spilling into Quesnalia. And like I said before, we have fixed some of the UI log bugs, but I think again, they're not errors in the handling of the records. They're errors in the presentation of how the records were handled. So the data is fine. What we're telling you happened to the data is not so fine. And if we don't get that fixed, some of that's going to move to Quesnalia. Being able to match on inventory records by purchase order line, and then trying a secondary match by vendor reference number is not working. You can do one or the other, but not both. And so we want to try to get that working. We have run into situations where if you cancel a job and then you immediately want to start another job, the old job doesn't really seem to free up quickly. And so we've done some work to try to clean that up. And then there's one scenario where the 005 data is not getting updated properly with the current date and time when you import. And so we want to fix that. And then one that we are in the middle of fixing with a kind of version 1 fix is that if you have the same record multiple times in a MARC file, the second time the system sees that same record, it chokes, and it chokes the entire import job. What we want it to do is to error the second time or the third time or the 6th time in that file, let the first one go through, and then let the whole job finish. We know that's not the final way that folks want it handled, but at least it's not going to choke the entire job. And so it's a first fix that we can do to at least get the job to finish properly. And so what I want to spend just a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes on, is the multiples, because this has been the big piece of work that has caused a lot of work for the developers. And we finally have pictures that we can show everybody. And so I described it earlier. Basically, I have either multiple holdings or multiple items associated with one MARC bib or one instance that I want to create or update. And up until now, you could only create or update one holdings or item based on one MARC bibliographic record. When we started being able to create orders in ORCID based on data import, that immediately caused problems, because if you ordered multiple copies or a print and E mix, we couldn't take care of the holdings and the items that needed to be created. But we knew that this fix was coming, and so we are trying to handle it all at once now. So this is an example of a record. Sorry. I'm going to turn it around and try not to kill people's ears. This is an example of a record, and at the bottom there's 6 945 fields. And what you'll see is that 5 of them are for physical versions of this thing, and they have barcodes here in subfield B, and they have copy numbers in subfield C. And the 6th one is for an electronic version of this thing. And so it has no barcode, but it has a URL. So I have different data, but all of the data that's the same data element is in the same subfield in each field. So I've got the permanent location in subfield H, the holdings type in subfield G, the item type, item format, whatever it is that's up at the top of the item record in subfield A, barcode in subfield B, and the URL in subfield U. When you're doing an import, all of your item and holdings data that you're trying to bring in from the MARC bib need to be in the same field, different subfields. I know some libraries are used to having their holdings data in one 9XX field and their item data in a different one. They need to all be in the same field because that's what's going to help us with the matching if you're trying to do updates. And that's what's going to also help us understand that these first three that belong to main are all going to be the same holdings. And then these next 2 that belong to annex are going to be a different holdings. So something to keep in mind, something you may need to check with your vendor if you get records from your vendor with multiple copy stuff in them. So here's our field mappings. I'm not going to take you through the many field mapping screens, but you'll see that the data is a mix of default information and mapped information. So instance is simple, just like it most of the time is. We've got the date and a status. Holdings, we're getting the holdings type and the permanent location from 945. Call number type, we're defaulting, and call number we're getting from 050 A and B. If the call number is going to apply to all of the holdings or all of the items, you don't have to move it down into the 945. If you only wanted the call number on your physical pieces, but you didn't want it on your electronic holdings or your electronic item, then you would need to copy that call number down into the 945 for the physicals and leave it out of the electronic 945. But as long as it's going to be the same for all of them, you don't have to copy it down into the 945. In the item record, we've got barcode, material type, copy number, and URI mapping from the incoming data. And we've got permanent loan type and status being defaulted. We've got most of the electronic access info being defaulted. And what's going to happen when this data comes in, say the electronic access 945, there's no copy number on there and there's no barcode on there. It's just going to skip those fields in the item record. And all it's going to fill in is the URI and the material type. For the physical materials, it's going to pay attention to barcode and copy number, but it's going to ignore the URI because there's no subfield U in the 945s for the physical items. So we did the import, and this is what happened. We have an instance that was created. Oh, and this was all creates because I wanted happiest, easiest path for this. So we had 1 instance created, 3 holdings created, and 6 items created. And it's a little small to see, but there's a little 3, 2, 1 next to each of these holdings. And if I expand them, you'll see the 3 holdings, or sorry, the 3 items for main that now, instead of saying on order, that say in process and have barcodes, the 2 for annex, and then the 1 holdings for online with the one barcode that, the one item that has no barcode and is just online. To show you a little bit of a difference between the holdings type and the permanent locations filled in from the 945. The call number type again was defaulted, and then the call number filled in from the 050. All of those filled in from the 945 data, but the holdings type and the permanent location differed between the different 945s, whereas the 050 call number info didn't differ. The last holdings record, which was for the electronic, we have a different holdings type and permanent location, but we've got the same call number type and call number. And then for the item records, the first item record for the main location, again, we've got different material types and barcode. And in item record 6, I actually put the URL, the electronic access information into the items instead of in the holdings in this one. We've got this electronic access section, but we don't have a barcode and we have a different material type. The other place we made big changes was in the import log. And this, keep in mind, is one record. If we had multiple records, you'd see a lot more data. We also made one other change, which is that the job profile that you used to import this file is now displayed at the top of the log and is a hot link in case you want to go double check it. And there's a change that Kathleen showed where if the file has been broken into pieces, you'll also, and even if it hasn't been broken into pieces, you'll see a hot link here where you'll be able to download the MARC file or the portion of the MARC file that's represented by that log. So in terms of the log, in the summary here, we just have one incoming MARC, created one instance, but 3 holdings and 6 items. And then down in record number 1, we have the 3 holdings that were created. And to make it clear which holdings was which, we have added the one required piece of information in a holdings record, which is the permanent location, so that if you want to go look at the main versus the annex versus the online version, you can tell which is which. And for the items, since we couldn't count on barcode, we've added the HRID as the differentiating piece of information so that you can see each of the 6 different barcode, 6 different item records. In terms of the JSON data that you can get to from the log, instead of having this infinitely scrolling right with a different tab for each of the different holdings and items that were created, we've stacked them vertically so that we still only have 1 tab for holdings and 1 tab for items. We now have the differentiator, so the permanent location on the holdings to differentiate the first, second, and third holdings. And on the item, we have the HRID that differentiates. And here's the last one that has the electronic access info. If there's an error, you'll see that red bar. And depending on how far it got before it caused the error, you'll have more or less information about what the problem was. So that's multiples. Any quick questions? Yes.
I have 3, so I'll just try with one. The duplicate incoming records solution, is that, how does it identify duplicates?
If it's trying to match to something that exists and it matches to the same thing that it matched to previously in that same file, then it's going to know it's trying to do the same thing trying to do something else to the same record that it's already worked on in that same job. If you're just creating, it won't have any idea because it'll just create if you don't have any kind of match profile in there. Anything else? Anything on chat? All right.
Can I ask my second?
Sure.
I guess third question.
That was really fast.
I'll be back. When importing the record, also, when you're importing a record, the way that the holdings are built and it recognizes the holdings is based on location. Is that true? So the location is different, then it's different than the records.
Yes. Okay. So the Oh, the question was if it's building, if a multiple is building multiple locations, how does it know to build a separate holdings? And it's based on the permanent location code. So all of the 9XXs that have the same permanent location code will end up going into the same holdings record, and all the items associated with it will go into the same. We did talk with libraries about, are there situations where you have the same permanent location in multiple different holdings on the same instance? The decision was it was few enough times that they would deal with it manually if that was the case.
Question 3. Thank you for, by the way, for all this. Do item records have to be created on the same profile? I'm trying to picture creating, because in that example, if we were doing that in our library, we would not want an item record on the electronic resource.
Oh, good question. Right now, the action is going to be the same for everything. You could trick the system. You would end up erroring the item records for the electronic if you left out a required piece of information like the format. But that's the only way I could think of now, because right now it's going to perform the same actions on all of the 9XX fields. So that would be my fast hack for making it not create them for electronic. And it's also a question of how much do you have physical and electronic on the same record. That may be a common use case or a not so common use case for a library. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn things over to Olamide. Some of you saw him starring in the consortial session yesterday. Delighted to have him here with us. He is our architect for FoliJet and for data import and a lot of the consortia stuff. And do you want lavalier or the, okay, let me get it out of my pocket. All right.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Yes, so our session on Tuesday, we illustrated some changes that we made with data imports, and that will mostly bring stability to the system. With our heads above water now, we can actually try to look forward and make more systemic changes to data import to get it to a better place in terms of reliability and speed. So here is a starting point of the changes we know that we want to get into place. And of course, there will be a more formal roadmap down the line. So first, job profile validation. So you can have a mix of match and action profiles that are actually not valid, and the system will allow you to save that, and you'd only know that there's an issue when you run the data import. We want to bring those errors to the forefront to let you know that, hey, this mix of match and action profiles are not valid, or it's being used not the way developers of data import as expected, and as well as add more informational stuff about the actions and the match profiles that you have. The ultimate vision here would be having like Anne-Marie code to tell you that this job profile you have is going to do X, Y, or Z prior to you moving forward. And it's a dependency on another item we will discuss here. So that's one, job profile validation. And then job execution heartbeat. So there are times where you say, hey, my job has been running for 16 hours. What's going on? The card says running, but really nothing is going on in the back end. Data import and Folio in general is a distributed system. So from data import side, the job is running, but there's an error over on inventory land, and there isn't a way to make that communication between those actors. So this particular item is to have some sort of how I say, let's just say heartbeats across the actors of data import, so that we can at least inform to say a job has stalled, or be able to take action on any specific record. For example, if I've not gotten any events, any logs, anything in, let's say, 30 minutes for a data import job, most likely something's really wrong somewhere. And to be important to flag that and possibly have endpoints to expose when jobs get into an invalid states. That could also help ops too as well, to be able to jump in to say, hey, do we need to restart a module? Do we need to capture some logs? Do we need to perform any action just to create that awareness? Also deleting transient data, old log entries, old versions of source records, orphan source records, Kafka event identification data. We have some structures in data import now that are really past when the job is done, doesn't really matter to the system, but they exist there and are always there. I hear that some hosting providers have cron jobs to delete data from the system that would accumulate, over time. So this really needs to be baked into the system so that we don't have external scripts trying to manipulate those items. So this will go a long way with clearing data into the system and reducing data load. This is important, especially for source records. You have a 50K file. One of the first steps we do is save the source record, and then a bunch of things error out later. So now you have 50,000 source records in your source record storage that you would never really be able to get into, because when you run another data import, that creates a fresh batch of source records. So being able to identify those and clean them out are things that we're going to be putting in place. Up next, error codes. So this too, I'm sure you've seen weird Java exceptions, weird database constraints, errors that library staff can't really do much about, but that gets exposed to users of data imports. So what we want to do here is to be able to capture those exceptions and present a user-friendly message that could potentially be actioned on. So this too requires a refactor of source so that we can ensure that errors that happen in the system are captured and we can label them appropriately and make things work. So this will go a long way with usability to say, hey, you have a value in in your job profile that is not suitable. Change this to X, Y, and Z, things like that. And then deleting all source records belonging to a job. This is coming from a rollback need standpoint, where we have issues that have occurred, and how do you get data, invalid data, out of the system. So this would be a endpoint with a disclaimer, because Folio doesn't have record deletion fully fleshed out yet. So having the ability to delete a source record that may be still linked to an instance, for example, can create dangerous scenarios. But we hear that now when issues occur, maybe there's some scripts being ran, or people are going to source record storage to delete records manually. So having an endpoint to say, I have a bad job, please remove the source records from this particular job and clear that out of the system. That would be very useful to users of data import. Maintainability, job profile, import, export. Anne-Marie will speak a little bit more about this in further slides as well. But when we have issues in data import, it's really hard to reproduce. So typically the job profiles we would have in like a bug fest or in development are pretty trivial, but you guys have complex job profiles that need specific reference data that would not be available to in non-prod environments. So this will allow us to be able to transfer job profiles between environments, and I'm sure there are good uses for migration purposes, say implementing new customers, and getting them from a test environment to a product environment. But on the engineering side, this is going to be really important to be able to have the job profile that created an issue and be able to have that run in different environments. Next is exposing the journey of an incoming record, generally more logging. This is to target data problems. So issues with data import can come from different areas, whether that's an error in the profile, some data issues that exist, or maybe something in the source record. For data problems that, it's customer data, something is going on in the customer data, we're not able to get at that information and have that to be able to troubleshoot the issues you're having today. So we're going to add more logging or be able to expose the journey of an incoming record. So let's say you have a 10,000 record file, we're able to say, okay, this incoming record went to inventory, we try to do a match, it did not match, then it went to other sections of the job profile. And then last but not least, incoming record journey simplification. And I want to illustrate that with two diagrams here. So this is a flow of how a data import job would work for creating instances. Generally, you see a bunch of back and forth between mod source record manager, source storage, and inventory. And we want to change it to something like this. And the idea is that both images you see are still accomplishing the same thing, but in a much simpler form. And what that can have is less HTTP calls, less Kafka messages, and less thrashing of SRS records. So let me paint a picture here. And for a single record import, so what I'm talking about now is a single record import. SRM, Source Record Manager, will make 28 calls to mod inventory. That's issuance types, instance status, a bunch of inventory data to create a mapping profile. So that's 28 calls all at the same time to inventory. Inventory will call inventory storage. Inventory storage will call the database, and then there's OCopy in between each of those messages there. So that's a lot. With the simplified form, we now have data import not needing to know as much detail about inventory and keeping all that logic on the inventory side, and that can allow us to perform even more optimizations. Consequently, in, let's say, step 2 in this diagram, generally all your job profiles will save to SRS as a first step, whether you're actually going to do anything with that. The most expensive part of the data import process is actually saving the source record. And due to this flow here, we are actually modifying the source record more than once for a single record. So we load a single record, we save it, incur expensive, incur a cost there. We create the instance. Oh, we have an HRID. We update the source record once more. And what that does is it clears all the work we've done, the cost that we have, all the expensive work we've done, it clears that out and does that once more and goes into that. And also, it could come in to say, I want to add the instance ID so that you can do a matching. So when you have an instance that is a source equals to mark, it can say, here is the instance I belong to. So that too will clear all the data that has been done and recreate that once more. So that's 3 times where our most expensive process is being done. But with the new way, we can say, inventory has done all the things that needs to be done. Now let's save to SRS results and minimize all of the changes there. Additionally, this is just instance create. Depending on the funky job profiles you have, this flow is even, a lot worse depending on where things are matching. And the idea is that regardless of whatever job profile you have, that generally this is what is going to occur, because the knowledge of what, for example, inventory lives in inventory, and there isn't a lot of shuttling between inventory and data imports to manage all of that. One other item is just the reduced coupling. Generally, what I want for my dev team is that I want a data import developer to not have to know all of inventory, all of acquisitions, all of any system that we want to integrate into data import, because that's a lot of cognitive load, and in my belief, it's against what Folio is supposed to be, and doesn't get us to a place where we have disparate apps and we're able to swap them in or out. So with some changes we're going to make, data import is almost going to be like a third party dependency. So similar to how in inventory you want to use a library in the code, we also have a library for data import, and inventory acquisitions would be customers of data import, and we provide appropriate APIs, interfaces, documentation, all of that to run. So with these changes, generally we're going to have better performance, especially if we're not incurring our most expensive process 2 or 3 times or even more. But obviously we're going to wait to have more performance numbers and be able to put that out. Up next is Ryan.
So all of that's going to be ready next week?
Yes.
Okay. A little bit of the, what are you thinking in terms of roadmap, or what's going to take to get to that kind of an implementation?
We need to, one of the first things that is easiest to get and to allow troubleshooting is to get the data import export of job profiles, which would be one of the first things. And the items here, it's more about moving logic between the modules that exist. So it's more of like a house cleaning. But definitely the path is there, and it's not going to be, all what I'm saying here is not like a 3-year thing where we start working today and in 3 years it's done. It's more of prioritization and there's definitely a path there.
Yes. And so not Poppy, not Quesnalia, but we're working on pieces along the way. And it looks like Christy has a question.
Oh, okay.
I didn't see this in the slide, but I heard you say something about the better matching and the sub-matching with regards to being able to update the instances and the SRS records. And I'm wondering if you can say more about that. I guess one of our challenges is that we have to have a match to update the SRS. Like if we want to update like the instance status and something in the MARC record, we have to have an SRS, a MARC to MARC match, and then we have to have an instance match. And it's possible that those are going to update an instance record and an SRS record. They're not associated with each other. And so it'd be great. I mean,
the validation. That's
where we've been asking for, like having like just one match. So if I need to update an instance and an SRS record, I can match one or the other because there's a one-to-one relationship between those.
Yeah, that's very specific. But I think I mentioned that when I was talking about validation, and the idea is that in the screen, let's say you created your job profile, it's going to tell you, what's going to happen. Whether that's you are trying to match against you're working with incoming records or you're working with existing records. There will be more simplification in this area, but I can't tell you specifics. But the idea is that once you create your job profile, you know what you're getting at the end of that. And when you try to match, you know what you're trying to match with, or whether that's incoming records or existing records. And if you have more specific workflows, we can talk about it, after this meeting, so that I can communicate more of the ideas that I have.
And I'm sorry.
Good.
There is a matching feature that Ryan's going to talk about, and that is one of the exact use cases that, because we have one-to-one between SRS marked bibs and instances, once I match one or the other, I should be able to update both without having to think too hard about it. I being Folio. That we haven't gotten Olavide to kind of weigh in on how to make that happen yet, but that's definitely a piece that we're looking at for Quesnalia.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, that got answer part of my question. So.
Okay. Yes.
You're mentioning the SRS is the real pain point. If a library were to not use SRS, what kind of would they how would they get a very noticeable data import performance increase? But I'm wondering if a library continually float the law, since you can now get non-SRS records out in marking, and you can also be able to ingest. I'm just wondering if they're getting damaged that or
How could you ingest and make your items and holdings and match and all that good stuff? Can you do that?
create the instance with SRS.
Right, I know, but okay, no, I think I don't understand well enough.
Transport format, you wouldn't be storing it all, just not store the SRS. You do everything except for store the SRS.
I'm guessing we should probably take that one off the line.
Yeah, I would say the expensive part of storing in source record is actually creating the data for matching. So that is the hard part. So it's just lying there is not expensive, but once you save a source record, now we need to process a bunch of stuff so that you can match on it later, and that is the expensive part. But like I am said, if we can take that, yes.
I was actually just going to respond a little bit to that. That's actually a feature that we've been waiting for. I don't think it's planned yet to be able to use data import without saving an SMS.
Right.
That's the only way that they.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. If there is no underlying SRS, you cannot control the instance. You cannot. There's not a way to surface all that data in the instance because it's assuming that the SRS is there underneath.
Yeah, it's kind of related to the question you asked, and I was telling you I'll talk about other flows. So part of the simplification here is that we are not going to save to SRS automatically for every job. That would be in control of the executors that we have. For example, my inventory. So this allows us to say I have a mark record, and I just want to say save it into folio and not have it in SRS if that is right. A point. But as it is right now, that is not possible with how the flow is set up. It always wants to go right. to SRS first.
Another really good example is I'm importing and I just want to update an item. I have to bring it in on a marked bib. I don't care about any of the data on the bib except for the barcode that's in a 9XX field. So throw it away after you've harvested that barcode and stuck it in the item record. Mm-hmm. And don't mess with my existing SRS marked bib because the incoming data may just be a couple fields. So, all right, Scott, and then we need to, I think, move on. Yes.
There's also someone who's asking if you could estimate someone who may ask you a question.
Oh, and we should be repeating the questions or wandering them. Okay. Okay, what is Jennifer's question? Oh, Jennifer's question. Can you
give me a second? So this is Jennifer's question from pharmacologist. For reliability, another issue that we encounter here at 5C is the presence of duplicate UUIDs like instance or mark SRS UUIDs. This is a problem that single import overlay and data export. This is something that will be looked at in architecture roadmap.
The short answer is yes.
That was easy. Okay. Okay, thank you, Alameda. And now, I am gonna do a very short introduction and then let Ryan mostly do his own introduction. We have a new product owner for data import. Some of you may be familiar with Christine, who works with Kalila and Spitfire, or Joe, who works with Dennis and Thunderjet as additional POs working with the developers and working on different apps. So Ryan has recently come over from another portion of EBSCO and is joining me and Alameda working with FoliJet and data import. And he is going to get us underway for Quesnalia and also give us a 1-minute bio, right?
Got it. All right. Hi, everyone. So, as I said, my name is Ryan Taylor. I'm a new PO to the Folio group. I've been with EBSCO for 13 years now. The last handful of years, I've been a product owner in our content space, working on EBSCO Discovery Service, partner databases, fun stuff like that. And I've been with this wonderful group in Folio for about 5 weeks. So if I ask any stupid questions, pardon that. But also I would love to hear from all of you and get to know you, get to know what you want from data import as I get up to speed and see how I can help you all out. What I'm going to be covering here is possible features for Quesnalia that we're considering. This first slide here, pretty large. I'm not going to get into all of this. This is just a general list of things that are up for consideration, including a handful of standing features, like Andrew mentioned earlier, that are kind of for bug fixes, QA, things like that. And this PowerPoint is uploaded to Sketch, so you can take a look at this on your own. These are all hyperlinked to Jira, but I will get into a handful of these into some more detail, give you an idea of what we're considering right now. So first up, something that Alameda alluded to is deleting old versions of records from SRS. So what we're considering here is the idea of an automated system logic to only retain the latest records in SRS. So our thinking here is that, we're concerned that the current storage process could lead to unnecessarily large databases, because currently it does maintain all previous versions of records. And so if we introduce logic here to only retain the latest version, that would help us to maintain healthy database sizes and avoid potential performance issues. There's a Jira ticket for that, mod Sourman 857, and that is hyperlinked here.
I made a UX prod, but I forgot to fix
Okay.
it's on the list.
Okay, it's on the list. Thank you. Next one here is mark-to-mark matching enhancements. So want to ensure that mark-to-mark matching works properly for repeatable and non-repeatable fields, especially 0xx and 9xx fields, and that they compare well with inventory submatches. Reasoning being that mark-to-mark matches and mark inventory matches have different use cases. Pairing mark-to-mark match with more specific mark instance or mark holdings or mark items match allows for identifying specific record to be updated or confirms that a new record is needed. Again, this is available in Jira today under UX Prod 2742. That will be fleshing out. Another one up for consideration here is normalizing the 035 OCLC numbers. So depending on the source of the OCLC record, various versions of the OCLC control number display. You can see this screenshot to the right that shows 3 different 035 fields representing the same record with the OCLC ID, but they're all slightly different. The feature would provide automatic cleanup to standardize presentation of OCLC numbers in mark bibs and instances. Reasoning being that inconsistent OCLC numbers cause difficulties for matching and are confusing. So we don't like confusion. So I'm going to look into that, see what we can do there. Another one here, ability to export DI profiles via API. I believe Amade alluded to this idea as well. So we're looking at the ability to export data import job profiles, including all link match action field mapping profiles via API. We noted this as version 1 with the idea here that we would focus on API option here and then consider options of a front-end UI option to do something similar in the future, but we'll start here. So the functionality would allow administrators to easily review job profile setup details and share with other institutions or share internally for troubleshooting, options like that. And of course, you need the flip side of that. You want to be able to import these. So want to look into the ability of importing data import profiles across tenants and environments. The hope here is that this would alleviate pain associated with current manual options of sharing and copying job profile details. Our hope is that something like this would also help to speed up testing across environments and minimize potential for human error when manually duplicating profiles across environments or sharing with within institutions. And please feel free to chime in if you have a question at any point while I'm working through these. Next one here is supply default job match action field mapping profiles within the data import app. So as I understand today, there is something similar to this concept for create instance authority and edeffect invoice profiles. The idea would be to supply default standardized profiles for data import that libraries could then edit and customize as they need. Thinking here is that if we have default out of the box profiles for data import, that would help save time in onboarding for new libraries. It would, you know, be a nice jumping off point rather than starting from scratch with profiles. You could have something to work with from the jump and customize it as you need. And that's in Jira today as UX Prod 2164. And those are the top ones that we were drilling into, getting some fleshing out a bit. So at this point, are there any questions around any of the top tier ones here that we were considering, or anything you noticed from the main list? Yeah.
I guess I was a little taken aback that there's still, well, I was hoping to eliminate mark-to-mark matching in my dreams, and I don't know if that's possible because I think, and I thought maybe this is what Christy was saying earlier, the complexity for us is building a profile and what the system has to do seems to be prohibitive to like a clean import. And that is when we have to match on the instance record in the inventory folio record, but also create a match on the mark-to-mark matching when theoretically there's a one-to-one relationship between the two. So is it ever possible just to eliminate that step? And then looking at your chart and thinking that just all flow back, is that just a pipe dream or is it, does that make any sense?
Yeah. Anyone have immediate thoughts on that?
So you want to be able to say, basically have match to instance matching only.
One or the other, I guess.
One or the other, okay. Yeah. Yeah, with the current flow that I showed you, it's difficult to do what you're saying. With the new flow, it's possible to do that because when with the new flow, let's say everything's on the inventory side, inventory has access to the instance and the mark file, and if you say match to an instance and modify the SRS record behind that, is able to link those two and move on. But with the current flow, a lot of the changes I mentioned here, if we do that without simplifying the flow, it's going to make things more complex. And that's why, yeah, that simplification is necessary to be able to get at the kind of features we want. So, yes, we want to get that.
And I think it's being able to have one or the other in a profile, but sometimes a mark-to-mark match is better or easier, and sometimes a mark-to-instance match is better or easier. And I'll give you an example. We throw all kinds of numbers into 035 in the mark record. So matching an 035 to an 035 is kind of a pain. But matching an 035 to an instance OCLC number, it cuts down on the number of kind of 035 values that you're trying to match to. On the other hand, sometimes in the instance, things that are multiple subfields will get smushed together. And a good example is ISBNs, where a lot of times the subfield Q data or the subfield C data gets smushed into the value with the numerics of the ISBN. So matching 020 to 020, a mark-to-mark match may be more helpful in that case. But I think the goal would be when you're talking mark bids and instances, to have one match at the top that's either mark to mark or mark to instance, and then be able to do what you need to do to the mark in terms of updating it, respecting the field protections, and then whatever you need to do to instance in terms of updating it. And then you go on to holdings and items separately.
Kalila?
Yeah, sorry. So Lisa and Christy, I guess this is a question for you. You're asking essentially for instance to instance matching, right? So I'm curious as to what are some of the fields that you're looking to do that type of matching with?
I'm so happy to see the 035 OCL. I'll just.
Very quickly for us, it's all about the OCLC, subfield A, subfield Z. So I'm just so glad to see that yours brought.
I think Chicago has a cleanup, don't y'all do, to cut down the number of OCLC duplicates that you've got in the 035?
We do when we have time. Yeah. We're not keeping up with that, although we would love to. So we have a lot of sub-matching that we like to do. So for instance, we want to match on the OCLC number, and then we want to match on the instance status and or maybe an instance statistical code. Because sometimes we have multiple records with the same OCLC number, but they need to be managed in different silos in our catalog. And we need to make sure that we are updating the record in this instance status and not that instance status. So the way that it works now, we can only update the instance. We are not able to use any SRS update action profiles to act on any of those records because we can't guarantee that it matches on the OCLC number and the instance status.
Right. The update profiles, sorry, two mics, lots of talkers. The update profiles is another one. We didn't call it out, but trying to get the update profiles for Mark to work better, which I think we haven't done enough analysis of it, but I think it's similar to what the problem with the field protections are, that when I was a new product owner and the developers had never heard of Mark, we didn't take into account repeatable and non-repeatable fields and having to consider the handling of the repeatable fields in a more complex way. And that is on the list for consideration for Quesnalia. It just didn't get its own slide, but it's down here in the review and fixed mark updates for specific fields. One thing I just wanted to add to what Ryan was saying is that this, like it says, is possible Quesnalia. My guess is this is more than we can accomplish in Quesnalia because it's always more than we can accomplish. And keep in mind that Poppy was an extra long development cycle, and the intent is that Quesnalia is not going to be as long as Poppy was. But we are right now starting to define what is going to be in Quesnalia and what is the priority. And this was the first pull that Kalila, Harry, Ryan, and I did from all of the stuff that's hanging around as possible features for data import. And the next step is going to be talking with the SMEs, whether that is getting the subgroup back together, time to get the band back together, or how we're going to handle that. But we're going to need to start defining more use cases, more details for these features so that we can understand how large they are and what we're going to be able to fit. And that's going to be over the course of the next few weeks. We have about 4 or 5 weeks, I think, to get that planning done.
I'm just gonna read a question from chat. So Jennifer from Five Colleges has two things in chat. First is another issue I think Jennifer's suggesting to consider for this release or the Q releases. Override for field protections is only at the update mark SRS level, I think.
Yes.
And so I think that's something that she's bringing up in relation to, I think, the discussion here, actually, now that I read this out loud.
Oh, because
Yeah,
it's update SRS. Right. We need updates for instances and SRSs to be kind of interchangeable. Yeah.
Okay, and then the other point is one difficulty, I think this is still tied to matching, is that the administrative data lives on the instance record and not at the mark SRS bib. It would be great to match to either the SRS, sorry, I gotta move over my hover, or instance and update the bib data, the administrative data, and perhaps override some field protections.
Or what if you could do one match, but then you could have update SRS mark and update instance.
I think that's what she's asking.
Okay, we don't have to smush update SRS mark and update instance into one field mapping profile, do we?
No, I think it's just having
Having both of
the
them.
ability to do one match.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I think that she's asking a question similar to what Lisa
Yeah.
and I were asking, the ability to have one match
Yeah.
and then attach instance actions and SRS actions
Yeah.
to that one match.
Alameda and Kate, you got to get your heads together about this one, because I know Kate has told me reasons it's hard that I don't totally understand, but y'all can figure it out together, I'm sure.
Yep.
Was there more from Jennifer? Okay. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that because we are looking at a significant list like this, and we are trying to finish Poppy, and we have another product owner now, one of the things that Ryan and I have been talking about is kind of leapfrogging each other so that he would kind of take the lead on gathering requirements and championing these Quesnalia features, while Kalila and I are still working with him to learn Jira, because he comes from a rally background. And then, I would be ransoms. And so that way we can, I can concentrate a lot on the Poppy testing as he's ramping up Quesnalia. He can concentrate on the Quesnalia testing while I'm ramping up ransoms. And that could be an interesting way to go. So we're still figuring this out. Like Ryan said, he's just been around for a few weeks. Right now, he is shadowing Kathleen and the task force because they will dissolve in a few weeks. And so he is going to be the kind of knowledge transfer helper for all of that back into FoliJet. And I just wanted to show, because one of the things that freaked me out a couple of weeks ago, I did not realize that OCLC was outputting leading zeros on these numbers. And I guess I had never noticed them. And those are evil.
Flux keeps the character set or the number.
It keeps the number. They should have never sent out OCM and OCN into the world. And this messes up all of our numerics only matches, I have no doubt. So yeah, we've definitely got to do something to clean these up. Ideally, we want to do something that is standard across all the libraries, so we don't have to build this as a setting. But then we'll also need to build some kind of a cleanup script that would go back through all your records. All right, so anything else with regard to Quesnalia? It's 5 to 5. We are not going to do any user acceptance testing. I did want to put in a plug. If you have time for user acceptance testing, you really, really would like more feedback on the multiples. There is a UHE form that is linked here that tells you how to set up access to the FoliJet Rancher environment, which is our development environment. If you use that instead of Snapshot, your data and your profiles do not go away every night, which is incredibly helpful when you're building the profiles that are involved with multiples. Also, your logs and your records don't go away. We are always interested in any bugs that you find in ORCID or obviously in your own implementations of ORCID. And after I can't even remember which meeting it was, a couple days ago, Felix and I were, it was the MMSIG conversation. Felix and I were talking, and I had created a bunch of draft test trails and linked them to JIRAs. And some of the MMSIG members were going to help me by filling out the details of those. Many of those are still draft, and it would be lovely to get some help with those so that my poor, fantastic, wonderful manual QA doesn't have to fill out all these very old tests. Maxim Ischenko, who is one of our fantastic Ukrainians on the project, all he wants is a McDonald's flurry and he will be happy. Felix said we will have this as a topic at one of the future MMSIGs in the next few weeks, and I'll kind of remind everybody about those things that are hanging out in test trails. And some of them will take 5 minutes to write, some of them will take longer than 5 minutes. And if you have 5 minutes to kill, it would be great for these poor little neglected, abandoned, orphaned, dying in the cold tests to be adopted and given a warm and loving permanent home. All right, y'all have hung in until the bitter end of WOLFcon, and I can't thank you enough for coming to data import, for everybody that has endured the heat of Chicago these last few days, and for our fantastic hosts. I think all of us who talk to each other on the phone or on Zoom, and most of us don't turn on our cameras, it's amazing to get to see each other in person every once in a while. And especially after our hiatus there during COVID, and for the folks that couldn't come to Germany last year, it's been wonderful to have so many people here and so many new people. I cannot believe how much our community grows every time we have another WOLFcon. So thank you very much. We're all here. We'll all be on Slack all the time. When we're not on Slack, we're on Jira. Every once in a while we sleep. But yeah, that's data import.